The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to have a chat with Jason. Jason's going to tell me where and when he was born. He's going to describe what it was like, where he grew up, the schools he went to, and the education that he received. So, Jason, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tim. Absolutely delighted to be here. Being asked to talk about my childhood and my education doesn't happen very often, so I'm looking forward to this.
Good. So, when and where?
Born in Leeds, in Yorkshire. And every time I say the word Yorkshire, I put that stupid accent on because I was actually brought up in Yorkshire, but I don't have the accent. Although people who hear me in the UK can hear the accent, very slight bits and bobs here.
Yeah, there's a bit of a twang there. Must have
a little bit of a twang. I was convinced it was totally neutral, and apparently it's not at all. But I've been living in France and Mauritius in Africa for the last 35 years. So I kind of got used to people just saying, "Oh, you're English," and that was as good as it got.
Monsieur.
Oui, monsieur. Why am I imitating your accent? How very rude. Oui, monsieur. I actually speak good French.
My French is brilliant. I mean,
right.
Some years ago, I used to. I was driving a line truck from Oslo to Paris for a Norwegian company, and we used to go to a factory down just outside Le Mans, and I used to drive into this factory. I'd pull up with this Norwegian wagon and drag, and I would see the charge hand coming out. You could see his body just sink when he saw me. I shout across the yard, "Bonjour, monsieur, ça va? Avez-vous changé pour moi? S'il vous plaît?" And he's come out, he's put his hands over his please, I speak English, don't speak French.
What you just described is what I sounded like when I was looking for work in the south of France picking grapes. And it was pretty much the same thing. The one thing I did want to ask is, when you drive all the way down there in your truck and you get to Le Mans, do you just drive around in circles 24 hours? Like, do you do the Le Mans race? It might be good fun.
We were sort of either we were driving, eating, or sleeping. And some days we were running with 2 or sometimes 3 tachographs in a day.
Right. Oh, yeah. Oh, were you allowed to swap them out?
Running slightly bent at the time. This was a while back. It's the reason the Norwegians are employing English drivers, because we'd earn £1,000 a trip. And if you could do 2 trips in a week, that's £2,000 for a week back in the early 90s.
Wow. Oh, I'll tell you what, early 90s, I was earning 200 quid a month playing music in a punk folk band. So you were rich and I was poor.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll come on to that. So,
sorry.
Schooling.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Born in Leeds, and we moved to a farm in the middle of the Yorkshire moors when I was, I think, 2 or 3. And that was literally, it's like Hound of the Baskervilles stuff. It was right at the end of a road. Thank you very much for the sound effects. Right on at the end of a road as it went off onto the Yorkshire moors, and the village had 25 people in it. So tiniest village you can possibly imagine, on a derelict farm, which my dad then proceeded to kind of build back into being a normal kind of house. And he wasn't a farmer; he's a university professor. And then my mum left me dad with 3 children to bring up in the middle of the Yorkshire moors with a Hound of the Baskervilles for neighbours, going to the local school. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's probably his own fault, expecting her to live in a derelict house.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't go into their relationship, but she ran away with a jazz musician, which is kind of exciting. That was in the 70s. So you had a father bringing up 3 children in the countryside in the 70s. And if you've heard of Ilkley Morbartat, we were right opposite Ilkley in a tiny village called Denton. We were actually in High Denton. And sorry, that's my phone ringing. I should have turned it on to, what is it?
Silent.
Thank you very much. I'll do that now. But unfortunately, we didn't go to the really posh school in Ilkley because Ilkley's quite posh. We got sent to Otley, which isn't posh at all. Otley. They're famous for rugby. I do apologise to anybody from Otley or from Yorkshire for my stupid accent, because what was interesting at school is I went to the school in Otley, and at school I had to speak like this all day long and say, I'm having my dinner at lunchtime, and then go home and say, hello, Father, delightful to talk to you. Oh, absolutely. I had this kind of dual personality with this accent that I had to change, because if I spoke with the posh accent at school, I got beaten up. And if I spoke with the Yorkshire accent at home, I got a slap round the head. And one nice story from my kind of school days was we had dinner tickets. You know, lunch was called dinner. And then I would have dinner at lunchtime, and then I would go home and I would have dinner with my dad. So I had 2 dinners every day of my life when I was a child.
That sounds reasonable, I suppose. I suppose do away with lunch and have dinner at lunchtime. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, you get up, you have breakfast, then you have dinner, then you have dinner again, then you go to bed.
Yeah. Not forgetting a bit of supper before you go to bed.
Yeah, well, I used to go and stay with my friends, and those days I would get breakfast, dinner, tea, and supper. And I quite liked that. It was really nice. I got 4 different names for the different meals in the day, so that was much more pleasant.
Sounds like a lot of fun back then.
Yeah, and I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. I mean, like, kind of not so much to do with schooling, but because we lived in the middle of the countryside, and because it was all like landlines, you didn't have the mobile phones, and I had to walk 3 miles to get to the nearest bus stop, and then there was like a bus every 2 hours to get into town where I could go and see my friends. And so I never knew whether they were going to be there. So I walk 3 miles, get on the bus, go into town, get off the bus at the start of the town and start knocking on doors of my friends' houses, hoping they were going to be there. And often, of course, they weren't. And sometimes I would literally go around to like 15 different houses looking for my mates. And their mums would answer the door and say, you know, he's not here, he's off playing with his mates somewhere else. And I spent a lot of my childhood wandering from house to house. And then sometimes would get invited in by the mothers, and they called me Orphan Annie. And they'd give me food, sit me in front of the TV with some food and the heating on in the middle of winter in Yorkshire, and I would just sit there and get myself mothered by my friends' mothers, which was absolutely delightful.
Yeah, so thinking about that, it's like a double thing, isn't it? Because with all those sort of dinners you're having, you get to walk a bit of it off.
Good point. I was really, really skinny, and I was incredibly small. I was tiny. And at school, you know, kind of some people in life just decide to make their own lives harder than they need to be. I was tiny, 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 tiny. I decided I wanted to be the goalkeeper in football. And they called me the sieve. And the reason they called me the sieve is because I let in so many goals. And the strikers would just look at me and say, well, and they just kind of hook it over the top of me. Anything kind of above this kind of height would just go straight in the goal. So I was a terrible goalkeeper, called the sieve. Everybody hated me, but I insisted on being in goal in football because I wanted to prove I could do it, and I couldn't.
You'd have done better off playing rugby at scrum half.
Yeah, they tried to get me to play rugby, but I didn't really want to. Running around in the mud didn't seem to me like having just said that, running around in the mud is what you do in football as well. Anyway. So yeah, I should have been a scrum half. Good point. Thank you very much. I will now go back 45 years and become a scrum half. My life will be transformed.
Well, I was playing scrum half at school, and I played it until I was 56.
Oh, right. Oh, quite. And now you're 57, if I'm understanding correctly. I was being charming.
Thank you so much.
Right, yeah. So went to Prince Henry's Grammar School, which sounds incredibly posh. Prince Henry's Grammar School, but it's actually a comprehensive school in Otley. And it was fairly standard comprehensive school. I got
so you didn't do the 11 plus then to get in there?
No, we did the 11 plus, but that was to get into Bradford Grammar School, and I failed that. So obviously I wasn't smart enough. And I stayed at Prince Henry's Grammar School, and it was all about avoiding fights. I would spend every day just figuring out how to avoid getting into a fight with somebody. And it was all about, if you said the wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong time, there would be a fight with a big group of kids around going, fight, 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 fight.
Yeah.
And so I actually, what I decided to do on the first day of school, they all supported Leeds United. So I went in and thought, right, I'm going to support Manchester City because they all hate Manchester City and I'm small. And basically, one person had one fight with me and I just kept fighting and fighting and fighting. And they basically, at the end of it, said, well, he keeps fighting, he's small, and he supports Man City and he's willing to say so. So either he's totally mad or he's actually quite a good fighter. And so I generally didn't get into too much trouble. But it was kind of, I don't know whether many people in the UK went through that kind of schooling, but I just remember just thinking, how can I avoid getting into fights all day long? And then how can I also sit at the back of the class and never get asked questions by the teacher? I don't want to be the teacher's pet. That's the person who gets the most beaten up at school.
Yeah, I mean, I always found it when I did go to school, if you sit in the front, they tend to ignore you and pick on the Yorkshire at the back and mucking about.
All right, so I got it totally wrong. Oh, what an idiot. So that probably explains my painful school career. And I did my O-levels, actually, got through to the O-levels, and I got 4 out of the 9 O-levels, so I completely flunked. And I got a U, unclassified, for French, which is pretty impressive. And given the fact that I'm now totally bilingual, the irony is quite enormous that I was so very bad at French. But that was thanks to, or down to, my horrible French teacher who I hated with all my little heart. And I think I probably just didn't listen because I didn't like him. And I actually remember his name, Mr. Benton. And it's interesting is how much you like your teacher, or dislike your teacher in this case, has an immense effect at how good you are at a topic, a subject at school, and how successful you might well then end up being.
So for O-levels, that's 4 more than I got anyway.
Yeah, well, coming from a family with a university professor father, 4 O-levels is a bit below what was expected of me. And so he actually managed to get me into the A-levels, so I managed to do some A-levels, but only because he went in and bullied the head teacher to let me go through. I think they were going to throw me out, and fair enough to them. And we had a mock general election at school when it was Margaret Thatcher, and I stood for Labour. And I was so bad, and I was such a I was just really stroppy. Even the Liberal Democrats beat me. So I did this mock general election. I think I got like 3 votes, and they were from 3 of the teachers who happened to be really, really big Labour supporters and couldn't do anything else. So my mock general election experience is, I didn't vote for myself, very intelligently. So that's 3 votes out of 1,500 kids at the school, plus the teachers. That is for Labour at the time, who were, obviously not incredibly popular, but they were certainly doing better than 3 out of 1,500. So not a good politician, not very good at O-levels, scraped through my A-levels, and decided I would never go back into education ever again because I hated it so much. Oh, and I remember the teachers at school saying, "Oh, these are the best years of your life." And I just sat there thinking, if this is as good as it gets, I'm stopping now.
So what did you do at the end of school? You clearly didn't go on to university then.
Well, I actually then went to live in Leeds. And I remember I was lying on the grass in front of our farmhouse, which was now quite a lovely living-in house as opposed to a derelict farmhouse, lying in the sun thinking, isn't life wonderful? And my dad came over, he stood over me. I remember his shadow came across me and he said, "Don't know why you're looking so comfortable. I'm selling the house next week and there isn't a room for you." So I had to move to Leeds and live in a little flat, and I got a job. Oh, God. I got a job, 45 quid a week, or was it 45 quid a month? I can't remember. Selling computers to what are they called? Plant selling companies. What are they called?
Nurseries.
Yeah, nurseries. And I got a job, and it was basic. It was almost totally based on commission. And I spent 4 months and then got completely bored of it because I didn't sell anything. And I would go in and I would try and sell these kind of computer systems. This is 1984 to 1985. And I was trying to sell these computer systems. I'm going to say, it's brilliant. It keeps track of all your stock, all the plants that you're selling, and it's perfectly kind of all aligned. And then you can print these reports out. And at the end of the year, you've got perfect stock taking. And everyone would say, yeah, looks really good, but I'm not buying it. And then one day, one of the bosses explained to, not the bosses of the company, one of the bosses of one of the nurseries said to me, do you know what? You're never going to sell that. I was going, but why not? It's brilliant. It does amazing stock taking. It's dedicated to nursery. And he said, because we cheat the taxes by saying all the plants have died. So if you give us great stock taking, we can't cheat on the taxes anymore. And I just left the company after that. I thought, oh, yeah, okay. This is the world's worst job, trying to sell something to people that literally makes them make less money. And so I spent a year and realized in that year that working is worse than education. So I went back to university. But just based on the fact that I couldn't stand working. I mean, like, you go, anything's better than this. So I went to Liverpool to university at John Moores, which at the time was the cheapo polytechnic. When you had polytechnics in universities, and you had all the people at Liverpool University, the red brick posh place with the intelligent people in, and then us lot from Liverpool John Moores Polytechnic at the time, just generally being rubbish. But I absolutely loved it. Liverpool was like, I spent a bit over 3 years there. And turns out same as John Lennon, because my current job now is that I build Google's understanding of us, so that when people search your name, Google shows what you want. And I've managed, this is great, I've managed to get myself next to John Lennon in a presentation of alumni of John Moores Liverpool University. So It says John Lennon, Jason Barnard. It doesn't make me a better person, but I think that's cool.
Excellent.
And I studied economics and statistics, which makes me sound much more intelligent than I actually was. But I spent most of my time skipping classes, drinking beer, playing football with the Boot Boys, going to Anfield to watch Liverpool, and trying to learn to play snooker. I was watching snooker the other day on the TV. And, you know, generally speaking, I get reasonably good if I practice enough. I got quite good at chess at one point. And I must have played, like, I don't know, I spent days and days and days trying to learn to play snooker, and I never got a break above about like 6 or 7. You know, I get one red, then I get a blue, and then it'd all go horribly wrong. And I never got good at it. I never, ever got even a little bit good at it. And I don't understand why. Because darts in the pub, you know, I was never brilliant, but, you know, I got slightly better the more I played. And with snooker, however much I played, I never got any better.
So what else did you do up in Liverpool then, apart from sort of going around printing car wheels and stuff like that? I suppose
well, I lived in Toxteth, which was an interesting experience, because the Toxteth riots were in 1985. So I moved in, and literally 2 days later, the police had this kind of big barrier at the end of Prince's Avenue with all their riot shields and their kind of water cannons and all that shit. And then hundreds of people just came running down the street and attacked them. And I was this kind of 19-year-old new student going, ooh, is this what it's like all the time in Liverpool? So it was a bit of an awakening to kind of real life, especially as, I mean, I was brought up in the countryside amongst the sheep and the cows, and I thought I was this kind of punk and, you know, boo, you know, and absolute rubbish. As soon as there's a Toxteth riot, I was going, oh dear, this is really scary. And what we did, brilliant idea by me and my mates who were students, is we went and hid in the pub and drank beer. That was the solution to the Toxteth riots from the Liverpool noob students. Brilliant.
Wicked.
So yeah, I did 3 years there, studied economics. From an intellectual standpoint, it was actually quite interesting because we started by studying John Maynard Keynes and Galbraith, which were kind of the dominant, let's say, social economic, where the state has a responsibility towards the people in terms of health and in terms of education and in terms of transport and so on and so forth. And Margaret Thatcher won, I think, her second term, it might have been at that point. And you had Patrick Minford, who was at Liverpool University, and Friedman in America. And at that point, Ronald Reagan also won. And Ronald Reagan was big chums with Milton Friedman. And Margaret Thatcher was mates with Patrick Minford. And of course, Margaret Thatcher and our friend Ronald Reagan were busy mates. And so that neoclassical economics world just totally took over, literally from one year to the next. And we went from studying John Maynard Keynes and John Kenneth Galbraith to studying only neoclassical economics. And it was 2 years of kind of left-wing economics and then 1 year of very right-wing economics. And economics since then has never looked back and has stuck in this neoclassical thing. So I actually thought about doing a master's. And when I told them I wanted to study the fundamental base on which neoclassical economics is built and do a critique of it, they wouldn't let me do it because obviously that's attacking the entire basis of what they're trying to prove. Yeah. And they said, go and see the philosophy department. And I said to the philosophy department what I wanted to study. And they said, we've got no idea what you're talking about. We couldn't possibly judge a master's thesis on this. So I went back to the other ones and told them that. And they said, no, we're still not having you. So I moved to Paris and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah. So what did, just a quick one. So did you actually complete and get a double first, or was it not quite that good?
No, not quite. I mean, I didn't get much better than my A levels and my O levels. I got a 2-2, a fairly spectacularly average 2-2. This horse here is called Stanley the Counting Horse, who was a horse who could count. And we had a blues band, and so I spent a lot of my time in the blues band, singing in pubs and with this big deep voice, singing songs with this tiny bloke who was about this thin, with this massive kind of voice, singing blues songs from the 1930s in America. Totally incongruous and totally silly and absolutely wonderful. With a bunch of guys, one from Dewsbury and then some others from Liverpool. So I got a 2-2 just because I turned up, as far as I can tell. I mean, I don't think I did anything decent in terms of work. So I got a 2-2, very average, very second-rate, uninteresting degree from a not particularly good university. And that's absolutely fine for me. So I got my degree.
Yes. So moving on to Paris then. Why Paris?
Well, I'd been, as I said, my mother was a musician, or is a musician still, and she went on tours around Europe. And so every now and then the kids would spend holidays with her, and she took us on tour. How cool is that?
Wow.
And in one of those tours, I think I was about 17, so I wasn't being taken on tours so much as tagging along, because probably, now I think about it, she probably didn't want me around, and I just forced myself on them. And they were playing a gig in Paris, and I thought that'd be really cool, so I kind of pitched up in Paris, and I met a woman, well, a girl who was 16, I think, at the time. So, and I totally fell in love. I mean, totally big eyes. And she was reciprocal about kind of the lovey thing going on. And so I went back to Liverpool, to Yorkshire and to Liverpool, and we were sending each other postcards with, "Ooh, I love you, ooh, isn't it lovely?" And heaven knows what we're writing. It only occurred to me a few years ago that we were writing on postcards, and the postman or postwoman in Liverpool must have been reading these things, going, "Oh my," like giggling themselves to death as they walked down the road, stuck it through the letterbox.
After showing all their mates before going out and around.
Brilliant. Oh yeah, I hope I gave them some pleasure, because I'm sure I wrote some pretty pathetic stuff on those postcards.
Excellent.
And then I pitched up in Paris, and turns out she had a boyfriend who was very tall, whereas I was very small. He was very clever and had a first-class degree, whereas I was 2-2 from Liverpool, John Mosley University, having played in the world's worst blues band called Stanley the Counting Horse. And she looked at us, and I think she went, I think I'll stick with what I've got. So it kind of fell apart. But then I joined a band, and that's this one here. Which is a really cool story, because I was sitting around going, I wonder what I'll do now. And a friend of mine who I used to play ping pong with him in Liverpool. We had ping pong tournaments for some obscure reason. And I was actually quite good at ping pong, much better than at billiards or snooker. And he said, I've got some mates, they've got a band. Do you want to go and see them? So I went to see this band. And they were really good. I mean, they were seriously really, really good. I mean, second-rate blues band is one thing. This was a really good band. And they were playing kind of folk music with a big kind of, punky kind of feeling, punky attitude, let's say. And I saw them and I said, oh, that's brilliant. Wow, great. And then my mate told them that I was a musician, because I played a little bit of guitar and sang. And they said, oh, does he want to join our band? And I was going, oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, basically, they were playing in the street. They were busking and then played gigs from time to time. And I said, yeah, I'll join your band. I'm a singer. And they said, oh, we don't need a singer. We've got all three of us are singers. And I said, oh, I can play a bit of guitar. And they said, yeah, but we've got a guitarist. We don't need a guitar. We need a double bass player. I said, but I don't play double bass. And they said, well, if you want to be in the band, you have to play double bass. You don't have a choice. And I had 500 quid left in the entire universe, and I went and bought a double bass with it on the assumption that I could learn to play it. And then I turned up with this double bass, said, right, off we go. What do I need to do? And they said, we've got a gig in 30 days. If you can learn to play the double bass in 30 days, you're in the band. So, I mean, I learned to play the double bass not very well in 30 days. And I had a lesson from a German jazz double bass player. And he basically said to me a few things that are actually very good advice in general. For the double bass, at least, it was keep hitting it in time and you'll be fine. Nobody cares about the notes. And there are only two types of people in the audience. There are musicians and non-musicians. Non-musicians don't know you've played the wrong note. And jazz musicians will think you've done something really clever and won't dare to ask you what it was you did. And if you think about that, all you've got to do is hit the blooming thing in time and more or less in the right kind of range of notes and smile the whole time. And if you're smiling and bouncing around and hitting it in time, people will think you know what you're doing, even if you don't. And it worked. It worked an absolute treat. I mean, I'm pretty sure I didn't play particularly brilliant and I stopped and started at the wrong moments and got loads of bum notes in there. But, you know, I got in the band and then we had, I don't know, maybe almost 10 years. We recorded four albums, released them in Europe and toured Europe for 10 years, playing 660 gigs. So, you know, worked out. Better than my snooker career.
Yes. Couldn't have been any worse, that's for sure.
Oh, good point. I was putting the bar very low with the snooker career, wasn't I? And I was allowed to sing some songs, so I carried on singing a bit. And it was really, really, really good. It was a good bunch of people touring around France and Europe. We played in Italy, we played in Spain, we played in Ireland, played in the UK a couple of times, but I wasn't there at the time. Germany quite a lot, Holland as well. And we played a festival with Bob Dylan. He was obviously top of the bill, and we were obviously very bottom of the bill, but still got my name on the same poster. And we played a gig in Milan, and we got the gig, and then we turned up, and it was this tiny bar, and we set all our equipment up, and then nobody turned up, and we said to the owners, why didn't anybody turn up? They said, you two are playing in the stadium just down the road. So you had U2 playing in front of like 60,000 people, and we played in front of 3 people and some person's dog in this tiny bar. And the bar staff, yeah, who presumably were thinking, I'd rather be at the U2 gig.
Yeah.
But
so, all this 600 odd gigs that you did across Europe, what was the most memorable one?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, I'll tell you what. I know exactly which the most memorable one was. Is you talked about Le Mans earlier on, which is the 24-hour race.
Yeah.
And we played a gig in Brittany, which was absolutely brilliant. And it was the 24 hours of the little tiny French mopeds that kids ride around on. They've got the 24 hours of that, and they go round and round an athletics track of 400 meters for 24 hours. And while they're doing it, they have a big tent set up in the middle, and they have 24 hours of music from various bands like ourselves. And so we turned up and played, and it was literally like 1,000 people packed into this tent in the middle of this kind of track. And we would play the song, and it would be really only big sound system making loads of noise. And then the people would cheer, and you'd be going, woo. And then there would that silence would fall, and when you'd hear, it was very silly. But it was an absolutely brilliant gig. And I loved it to bits because it was so incongruous and because it was so silly.
Mm. So what was the worst gig that you did?
That's a difficult choice, because I mean, when it's like One Old Man and His Dog, which would be the U2 gig, obviously not quite that, but it was actually quite fun, because being in Milan in and of itself is just quite a lot of fun. But I remember one gig we played, and it was in Brittany again. So Brittany keeps coming up with why it might have been a great place to be. And we played a gig in a pub, and there were, I don't know, it was a pretty small pub, but there were about 100 people, and it was fairly packed. And there was a punk who was totally wasted, who was pogoing like this in front and ruining it for everybody, and generally being a bit of a plonker. And after a while, I thought, I need to kind of do something, sort it out. So I, with my double bass, jumped into the crowd and started pogoing with him in my punk manner with the double bass. And he was getting really aggressive with me. And I was trying to play the music whilst pogoing with this punk and trying to push him to the side so that it would leave some space for the actual people who were there for the music to dance. And at one point, I swung the bass around like that and smacked him on the side of the head. And the top of my double bass flew off. And to this day, it still doesn't have what we used to call Jason's knob. Jason's knob was missing from that day on, because I'd smacked this punk in the head with the top of my double bass. Knocked him out cold. They dragged him off. He was better later on. He was perfectly happy. And we had a good gig after that. So it was kind of the worst and the best in kind of different ways, depending on how you look at it. I've got another good story about my double bass. Is the French police, the French bomb squad, blew my double bass up because they thought it was a bomb.
It's awfully kind of them.
Yeah,
Did they replace it?
No. They said it was my own fault. I parked the van in front of a school during Vigipirat, and you weren't allowed to do that. And it's a long story, very boring. And I left my double bass in it. And what they did is they blew the back doors off the van to see what was inside. And my double bass was leaning against the back door. And when I kind of heard the explosion, I ran down. I thought, what's going on? What's going on? I saw the back doors blown off the van. And I thought, my bass is going to be matchsticks. And surprisingly enough, it wasn't. Double basses are phenomenally strong. It had 2 big kind of cracks down it. A bit of wood had fallen off, and I got a luthier to stick it all back together again. And I've still got it to this day.
Did it improve the sound at all?
Yeah, that wasn't my biggest worry as a punk folk musician. The quality of the sound wasn't the thing I was looking for. So yeah, I might have done, might have not done. I don't really know. But I used to be able to stand up on it, and so double basses are very strong. I could stand up on it and play it as I was standing on it. And I used to put it on my head to play punk folk version of the Ace of Spades, which was the finale of our gig. And if anyone wants to look online, look up the Ace of Spades, the Barking Dogs. We were called the Barking Dogs. It's actually pretty good. We were pretty tight and pretty. I think we were pretty good, and we had quite a lot of fun. So I think we weren't just rubbish. So it sounds pretentious, but it's worth listening to.
Well, I mean, if you managed 600 odd gigs across Europe over 10 years, you ain't done too bad, I guess.
True. Very true. So look up on YouTube, the Barking Dogs, the Ace of Spades, watch that, and imagine this double bass being blown up by the French police and then being smacked into the head of a punk and my knob falling off.
and it's still playing.
Yeah. Oh, and I've still got it. My first and only double bass.
All right. And you still play it?
Yeah, well, I haven't played it the last year because I've left it in the south of France. But yeah, I joined another band with my ex-wife's new partner and a friend of mine, and we played another. I got back together again with the singer from that band, my busy mate in the entire universe. And so between 2014 and 2019, we played another 60 or 70 gigs.
Brilliant.
So yeah, I played some music again, and I would love to get back to playing music again, play more gigs. So
bring us a bit further forward then.
Yeah, the band split up, which is one of those classic phrases from films like Spinal Tap. The band split up, and you think, oh, what am I going to do now? And I don't know why. I decided I would make a music album for children. So I decided I would write songs for kids.
That's a bit different from being a punk folk band.
It is a bit different. Well, I mean, I was with my ex-wife, and we had decided we would start a family, and I thought, kids' music, why not? That should be fun. And my ex-wife, who is absolutely delightful and wonderful human being, had a pretty good job as a graphic designer. And she just said, if you want to make music albums and look after our child, and I'll go out to work and make a living, you can be the house husband and you can look after our daughter. And while you're doing that, you can write an album for kids and release it if that's really what you want to do. So I did. And it was a really, really nice experience. And then none of the record companies wanted it. I thought I can just walk into these record companies because I've been in a band. I've had 4 albums released. I know all the bosses of all the record companies. So I'll get it signed and it will be released and I'll be a children's music star. How wonderful. And they all just said, no, we can't release this. You're a punk folk musician. You can't do children's music.
What?
So that completely fell through the floor as well. It was a totally mistaken idea. And so in fact, we discussed it with my wife, and I said, maybe we could create some characters. So she and I created characters. We wrote a story around it, and we created a website with this story with these 2 characters. Get this: Blue Dog and Yellow Koala. And the Blue Dog and the Yellow Koala sang the songs, and they travelled around the world singing songs. And we built a website in 1998. We started the website based on the songs with the characters traveling around the world. And my wife was a yellow koala, which is a great quote. And I was a big blue dog. And the website was a phenomenal success. And so, we started doing that for a living instead, which is really, really weird as an idea. It was such a success. In fact, we were competing with Disney, PBS, and the BBC as one of the leading sites for kids in the world. And we got 5 million visits a month, 100 million page views. And I was calculating that's every day kids were watching or playing on our website for 3,000 days.
Wow.
So each day in real life was 3,000 child playing days in our website, which is phenomenally bonkers. Yeah, and it's really cool. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was a blue dog and she was a yellow koala, and that was a lot of fun.
So moving on then. So what did you do after that?
Well, I'll just tell you what. While we were doing that, in fact, we moved to Mauritius, which is in Africa. It's just off Madagascar.
Yeah.
To a tropical island, and we actually built the website and ran the website from a tropical island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, from 2000 to 2008 or something like that. And there's a lovely story from that, because the blue dog was called Buwa and the yellow koala was called Koala. And we moved into a house in Mauritius, in its tiny island, in this tiny village in this tiny island. And I wanted somebody to send me a letter. So I went to the post office just down the road, which was this tiny little kind of hut. And I said to the postman, "What's our address?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know. People just write the name of the person and I know who they are, so I can deliver the letter." And I said, "Oh, can I choose an address?" And he said, "Yeah, if you want." And I said, "Oh, how about between the sea and the post office?" That was my choice. And he said, "Okay." I said, "Oh, can I change it? I'd rather have between the cemetery and the sea, because that's a bit more creepy." And he said, "Nope, you've chosen between the sea and the post office. That is your address. And that's where we will deliver letters." So what we ended up with is saying to kids or parents of these kids, if you want to send a drawing for the gallery on the website for Buwa and Koala, you send in a drawing of Buwa and Koala that your child has done, and you send it to Buwa and Koala, between the sea and the post office, Tamarin, Mauritius. And it was like writing to Father Christmas, the North Pole. These parents would send off their precious drawing from their child. And when it got to us, we'd post it up and they would write to us saying, "I don't believe it got there." Buwa and Koala, between the sea and the post office, Mauritius. Brilliant stuff.
Oh, brilliant. So how long did that last?
Well, until 2008, so it was a good 10 years. So kind of each chapter of my life has been 10 years. And then I stayed in Mauritius for various reasons, but my business partner took the company over in a manner that I would not consider to be fair and just, but that's a story for another day. And I lost the blue dog, and I was so involved in this character, it's totally insane. I actually started not to see the difference between me and the blue dog. I felt like I was the blue dog, and so I went a little bit mad, I think, to be honest. And then I needed to make money, because we were stuck with a young family in the middle of the Indian Ocean with no means of support, and I basically ended up working online, building websites and applications for clients from Mauritius, but the clients would be in Europe or America. And I built some insane things. I built a really interesting application. It's very boring as such, but it would calculate the shipping costs from any town in any country in the world to any other town in any other country in the world, depending on the price of fuel, flights, transports, and people being paid £1,000 to drive from Norway to Le Mans. Obviously, I didn't have all the data, but built a machine, and it was still running like 7 or 8 years later, and it was all based on one Excel sheet that my client had built, and then I would just use different bits of code to plug into it and change stuff. And it was really geeky, and I spent a couple of years just doing that, being such a geek. It was untrue. And then I moved back to France when I got that opportunity, and came back to Paris after living in Mauritius. Paris is a bit kind of dreary and dull and grey, so we moved to near Montpellier in the south, where it's sunny, because that's much better lifestyle.
And you got rugby down there as well, Montpellier.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was never the fly half, so I wouldn't go to the rugby matches.
You're missing out there.
Yeah, no, I'm beginning to think 45 years too late that I missed the trick on being a fly half. But I got to play Sorry.
Go and watch the local team.
Yeah, I think now you say it, honestly, if we'd had this conversation 4 or 5 years ago, I definitely would have gone to the rugby matches, just because in life, there's no particular reason I would go or that I wouldn't go. But if you say to me, that's a good idea, that's as good a reason as any for me to go and watch a rugby match, because I might actually turn out to like it. Done.
So you're down in Montpellier. So
well, I started to band up again with my mate Hugo, the singer. We played a few gigs of that, and then we had this concept of the garage party, because we were playing these bars, and they would say, "We want you to play 3 sets, and we want you to tell everybody to buy beer." And we were making a couple of €100 for a gig, and we both had kind of proper jobs. I mean, I was freelance doing SEO at the time. And I was just thinking, I don't actually even need the €200. I'm only playing a gig because I want to play a gig. I'm not actually interested in the money at all. And we just said, well, why are we playing in these bars? And he said, well, because it's a place to play where people come. And I said, well, I've got a garage underneath me flat that gives out onto the street and then onto the river. Yeah. Why don't we just have a gig in there and get our mates to come? Because people in the bar were generally our mates anyway. Yeah. So we started up this whole system, and then we probably had about 15 of them in total. And it was called the Garage Party. And we would set up our sound system in the garage and say to everybody in the area, in the region, just come along, bring some food, bring some booze, and we'll have a big party in the garage. And it ended up with about 200 people in the last one. And it was absolutely massive, and it was absolutely brilliant. And it was just having a party and sharing food and sharing drink and sharing a good time. And we got to play a gig, and then we put on a playlist afterwards. And some people who wanted to do a bit of music would get up and do a bit of music. And it was, I think, one of the nicest things I've done in my life. And I remember one of the last ones is we were playing, and I could see the 200 people, most of whom I knew. Oh, and people would walk by, and they would look in and they would say, "Can we come in?" And I said to them, "There's a little corner shop up the road. Go down there, get some booze, come back and chat and join in." And we ended up with all these people we didn't know coming into the party. But it was absolutely wonderful. And I remember just standing there playing the music, which I absolutely love, and thinking, this is where I belong. This is where I feel most at home. And you could see people with big smiles dancing, having a good time, and just, when you can do that, or when you're doing that, or when you're part of it, and when you can create that kind of atmosphere and that kind of good feeling and that kind of good time, and do the thing you like most, which is playing double bass and singing songs. Yeah. That was perfect. That was a moment of perfection. Oh, sorry. Can we come back to the question from before? That's my favourite gig.
Aha. There you go.
Yeah, and then actually at that point, I split up with my girlfriend and decided to give up my flat and the garage, and therefore the garage party, and travel around the world and live out of a rucksack and be a digital nomad. So I spent a year and a half just traveling from conference to conference in the digital marketing world, giving talks, doing interviews for my own podcast, living out of a rucksack. And I absolutely loved it. It was about a year and 4 or 5 months. With nowhere particular to live, living in hotels and Airbnbs, staying on people's floors. And then COVID hit. And unfortunately, I had to stop. Yeah. I mean, screwed everyone up for everybody. But, I had to stop. And so this flat is actually my daughter's flat. I still don't have a flat. And ended up, and this is really lovely because, I mean, she's 25 now. And I got, as a father, to live with my daughter for 2 years as an adult. And that's been absolutely wonderful because we get on really well. And oh, there you go. Now, I didn't do a master's. She's done a master's. She's really smart. And so I got to read her master's and go through it with her and discuss her master's with her and help her with the phrasing of things so that it read a little bit more smoothly. But, she's brilliant. She's got great ideas. She really expresses them well. And I had the immense pleasure of spending, in fact, she did 2 master's theses, and spending, probably about a month, spending pretty much every day, a couple of hours a day, just working through it with her and reading it and wow.
Brilliant.
That's not a gig, but it's one of my favorite moments in life.
Yes. So bring us right up to date then. What are you up to at the moment?
Well, yeah, I now specialise in Brand SERPs, and I wrote this delightful book. And somebody told me I should be smacked around the head for calling it The Fundamentals of Brand SERPs for Business. He said, that's a really boring title. And he's right, it is very boring. Because basically what it's saying is we need to educate Google. Google is a child. In fact, all of these machines, Twitter, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, they all have built these machines that are trying to understand the world. And they're all basically children. And it's our job as responsible adults to educate these children about our little corner of the world. So in this particular case, we're talking about Google, but it goes for any of these massive machines, is they will understand what they find online. We need to manage what our entity identity, you could call it, what our digital ecosystem is, what it contains, so that these machines can understand who we are, what we do, and who our audience is, in which case they can actually do useful things with the information. So far from being this scary big machine where everybody's trying to rank top to get traffic to their websites to sell lots of products, turn it around and say, Google is a child. We need to educate it. And educating it is surprisingly simple.
Well, Alex came out with something the other week on his second event. And he started off by saying, you need to work out who your avatar is.
Yeah.
To which I replied, my avatar hasn't been born yet.
Right. Okay. So your audience.
So my audience hasn't been born yet. And the reason they haven't been born yet is because what I'm doing is ordinary people's extraordinary stories. It's in 100 years' time, kids are going to be at school looking back at this time in history, and they'll be looking at what we did in this time period, and thinking, wow, is that how it all started for them?
Yeah.
The reason I got into it is because I was doing ancestry, and I came across my grandfather, or my great-grandfather, who lived across the harbour from where I live now in Portsmouth. He was a chief stoker in the Royal Navy. And I thought it'd have been great if I had a time machine to go back and have a chat with him about his life. That's lost.
Yeah.
When we got into lockdown, I was drinking far too much spice rum for my own good. And I sat down and thought, well, why don't I tell my story? Then my story won't be lost. So I started off, did 24 half-an-hour episodes of my life. Got to the end of that, did a couple more in-depth ones. Got to the end of that and think, what do I do now? We're still in lockdown. So I started off with my mother, and I haven't looked back.
That's brilliant is a word I would use just from the idea of the perspective and the way you're coming at it.
And the other part of it is I ain't bothered whether I make any money out of it or not.
Which is,
I'm retired. I can scrape by on my pension, so I'm not interested in monetizing it. I'm interested in interviewing as many people as possible to leave a legacy for future generations. So they'll look at this time in history and have an idea of what life was like now.
Yeah, that for me is the really, I really like that, because you're making an archive of a set of lives that we didn't have in the past. I mean, the whole thing about VHS, and even if you just look back to the 70s, 80s, and even 90s, we've got these VHSs, and they have time lapses that the actual material they're built on won't last forever. So all these people who put shit into boxes and then buried them, that's pooped, isn't it? Whereas all of this digital stuff theoretically can go on forever, and then it's just a question of being able to play the format back and create that archive, starting with yourself, then your mother, and then lots of other people. Absolutely lovely. And I'm very, very pleased and proud to be part of your archive of 2022 for the people. Hello, everybody, in 2032, 2042, 2052, and 2122.
Yeah. Well, it's been a privilege. It's been an absolute joy listening to your stories. It's fascinating how you just sort of keep bouncing back.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's been an absolute delight talking to you. I mean, you asked a few questions and I've blabbered on. I get the feeling I talked way too much, but
no, it's your story.
That's true. Oh, thank you. That makes me feel much better.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot, Tim. That was absolutely delightful. It was lovely just walking through my life in a kind of chronological and simple manner and telling some of the funner stories from it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing.
See you later, Tim. Thanks.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.